Withdrew from a key nuclear treaty with Russia, raising fears of a new arms race. The Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty was signed by US President Ronald Reagan and Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev in 1987. Now it banned missiles with ranges between 500 and 5,500 kilometers. Earlier this year, the US and NATO accused Russia of violating the pact by deploying a new type of cruise missile, which Moscow has since denied. Meanwhile, the US administration officials are saying that President Trump's latest tariffs on Chinese goods would not punish consumers, even as some White House aides privately acknowledged the move damaged prospects for the slowing economy to rebound this year. President Donald Trump unveiled new trade barriers targeting Chinese consumer products just one day after Federal Reserve Chair, that's Jerome H. Powell, warned that the president's trade policies were sapping business investment. Well, to help us unpack all of this, we're joined in our Pretoria studios by Dr William Mpofu, Senior Researcher at the Wits Centre of Diversity Studies. Good afternoon, Prof, and thank you for your time on the SABC News Desk.
Good afternoon.
Well, the USA earlier in Feb announced its intention to pull out of the INF Treaty, and it's now blaming Russia. I just want to garner your initial reaction to this, and can you tell us how important this treaty is for Russia, the USA, and indeed the rest of the world?
Yes, it's an important treaty in the history of the globe, one can say. And the US formal withdrawal from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty might indeed spark another mad arms race in the world, which will create further militarization of the world interstate system, create a global climate of uncertainty and fear. And other countries that were not party to this treaty might also find themselves encouraged or provoked into imagining and actually performing the production of such powerful weapons that make the world further uncertain and a very unsafe place to be in.
Doctor, the fear now is that the unraveling of this safety net will lead, or the treaty will lead to the destruction of the nuclear security safety net that the globe enjoys. How worried should we be at this point?
We should really be worried and concerned because the demise of this particular treaty also renders fragile the START, which is the other treaty of 1991, the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, which ensured that there was a stall or there was a stoppage to the production of further nuclear weapons. So the demise of this one renders that one also vulnerable to other withdrawals, and it might actually madden the race for big arms in the world and end up enveloping the world in another cold war or hot war, political and economic climate, which must be concerning to the thinking and the living world.
Doctor, by killing this treaty, with the USA opting out of this treaty, what message do you think this sends to other nuclear armed nations like India and China? Will this perhaps say to them, let's start our engines, because if the USA has opted out of this treaty, then so can we?
Definitely, it will become like, it will give a demonstration effect whereby other countries will start thinking about what they can do in order to belong and be in this further militarizing world. And for all we can observe, Russia might just be an excuse. It's politically thinkable that the concern for the US and actually the provocation and the irritation that has led the Trump regime to act this way is their fear of other countries that are not part of this treaty. Countries like Iran, countries like China, and countries like North Korea that were not bound by this treaty and were developing such weapons as the ones that are prescribed here. And we know for a historical fact that the US itself has been itching to rearm, to further develop these powerful weapons, and felt that the intermediate range nuclear forces treaty was an inhibition that sort of constrained them from developing much more modern, much more powerful, and much more dangerous weapons like the ones that are being discussed here. So there's really concern that this might become a global race for more dangerous weapons, which will make the world a much more scary place than it is already.
William, do you feel that the USA explored all diplomatic solutions fully or thoroughly enough before killing this treaty? Because if I remember correctly, Russia did offer for its weapons to be visually inspected early on this year, and that offer was turned down by the US. One would think that there should have been a more concerted effort to coax Russia and the USA into keeping this treaty alive. And we also know that John Bolton, the National Security Advisor, he's hated this treaty since Reagan signed it back in 1987. And it does go a long way to fuel suspicions that the point here was to kill this treaty and not get Russia into compliance.
Definitely, there's been some kind of unhygienic diplomatic haste and negligence. And it's known historically that some persons, some organizations, and some groups in the US have been contemptuous of this important treaty. And this moment is being used as an excuse just to use Russia as an alibi to get back to the arms race and manufacture more dangerous weapons. And this happens at an economic and political climate in the world where, which can be called the right moment, where right-wing sentiments, right-wing nationalisms, right-wing practices are on sort of on the return, where the world can be witnessed to be in reversal, going back to the dark decades where people lived in fear, where the end of the world was like imminent, and where dangerous weapons were being dangled around by privileged superpowers and powerful states and polities of the world. So it's quite a reversal in world affairs.
All right. We've seen the USA fall out of several international agreements under the Trump administration. They've left the Paris Climate Accord, Pacific Partnership, the anti-nuclear deal with Iran, like you've mentioned. So we're kind of seeing an ideological shift or approach that puts America first, but discredits bilateral agreements that most of the world bases their security on.
Yes, and it must be understood at a large-scale context, not just of the right moment in the world that is escalating, but also the US or the Euro-American empire facing decline and demise. There's a certain love for war and also a fear of war that accompanies this declining empire, and the fear of the rise of China in the world. So this is not just a desire for more power, but a fear for the loss of power by a country that has enjoyed hegemony for since 1945 in global affairs. So look at Trump as a personification or an embodiment of the fear of Americanism, of decline and demise in a world that is fast economically, politically, and otherwise being taken over by China and allies.
All right. Russia has previously said again and again that the USA pulling out of this pact will be very dangerous, and they might perceive this as a lack of good faith on the part of the US State Department when it came to negotiations of this nature. I know it's difficult to speculate, but what do you think the Russian response will be like now?
Well, there is a way in which other thinkers believe that it's a US strategy to draw Russia into an arms race bleed them financially and suffocate them economically and all that, because Trump has boasted that the US has got billions of dollars to play with in developing new weapons. So it's playing out at economic, political and historical levels, and the Russians are going to take this exactly what it is, which is jostling and agitating for war, for another arms race, and for the Armageddon as a battle for dominance in the globe. It's going to be received seriously.
Dr. William Mpofu joining us from our Pretoria studios. He's from the Wits Centre of Diversity. Thank you so much for your time.